My name is Zariah. I'm 60 years old, and what I'm about to tell you will irrevocably alter your perception of family. Just 3 days ago, my own son Tyrone and his wife Aaliyah deliberately pushed my husband Darius and me off a 90-foot cliff. As I lay there broken and bleeding, I heard Darius's desperate whisper, "Zariah, don't move. Play dead." But the physical trauma was nothing compared to the horrifying truth Darius subsequently revealed. A secret our children had concealed for a quarter of a century. For 40 years, Darius and I cultivated what we believed to be the quintessential family. Each morning in our modest suburban home, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the cheerful songs of birds. I taught at the local elementary school, returning home each afternoon with tales of my young students. Darius ran his carpentry shop, crafting breathtaking furniture. His hands, calloused yet remarkably deft, transformed simple wood into stunning works of art. We had 2 sons, Deshaun, our firstborn, and Tyrone, 5 years his junior. Deshaun was the heart of our home, always laughing, always assisting his father in the shop, always fiercely protective of me. Tyrone was quieter, more reserved, but I loved him just as intensely. As a mother, you never favor one child over another, or so I believed. Sundays after church, our entire family would gather around the sturdy oak table Darius had painstakingly carved. Deshaun would enthusiastically share his plans to become an engineer, while Tyrone remained largely silent, listlessly picking at his food. Life was simple, yet profoundly fulfilling. In the evenings, Darius and I would stroll along the trails surrounding our small town, sharing our dreams of watching our grandchildren grow, of growing old together in that very house. I never could have imagined those peaceful walks were, in retrospect, a grim rehearsal for the near-fatal plunge that would soon befall us. Weekends were filled with family gatherings as my sisters Monique and Keisha arrived with their husbands and children. Laughter filled the house, children raced through the rooms, women exchanged recipes in the kitchen, while the men worked together in the yard. Darius was my perfect companion. After 40 years of marriage, he still surprised me with wildflowers he'd picked on his way to work. He helped me grade papers and I would assist him in his workshop. We were a team, an inseparable unit, or so I believed. At night, we would sit on the porch, gazing at the stars, planning our future. We talked about traveling in retirement, seeing the ocean for the first time, building a smaller house once our children had established their own families. But perfect happiness, as I would learn years later, often masks the deepest sorrows. When Deshaun turned 20, a subtle shift occurred within our family dynamic. He and Tyrone began to argue about matters I couldn't comprehend. I'd overhear hushed whispers in the hallway, only to be met with silence when I approached. Darius assured me it was just typical sibling rivalry, that it would eventually subside. I desperately wanted to believe him, for I needed to maintain the illusion of a perfect family. One October night, precisely 25 years ago, Deshaun didn't return home for dinner. We waited 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 in the morning. Tyrone remained in his room, ostensibly studying, but I detected a strange, unsettling glint in his eyes whenever I inquired about his brother. Darius went searching for him with our neighbors, scouring every corner of town, every trail, every place Deshaun frequented. At dawn, they discovered his lifeless body at the bottom of the river gorge. The police attributed it to an accident, concluding he had likely stumbled in the darkness. I never questioned their assessment, for I couldn't bear to confront a far more horrific truth. Deshaun's funeral was the most agonizing day of my life. I wore my only black dress, the same one I'd worn to my mother's funeral. Tyrone displayed an unnerving calmness for someone who had just lost his older brother. While I wept until my tears ran dry, he remained silent, his expression now haunting me with its chilling implications, given what I know now. Darius never left my side, supporting me when my legs gave way, whispering words of comfort that I now realize were laced with bitterness. Following Deshaun's death, Tyrone underwent a complete transformation. He became more attentive, more affectionate, as if attempting to compensate for something. He helped with chores, accompanied his father to the workshop, and brought me small tokens whenever he sensed my sadness. I attributed this to his way of coping with grief, of filling the void left by Deshaun. How tragically naive I was. In reality, he was meticulously constructing a flawless mask to conceal the monster within. The years passed and the wound of Deshaun's death never fully healed, but we learned to live with the pain. Tyrone married Aaliyah, a sweet young woman from a neighboring town, and they appeared to be blissfully happy. They had 2 beautiful children, and I finally felt a glimmer of hope that life was offering us a second chance at happiness. Aaliyah affectionately called me Mom, and assisted with household chores during their visits. Tyrone had inherited his father's talent for carpentry, and had established a thriving business. Everything seemed perfect once more. But now, lying at the bottom of this gorge, with my broken ribs and the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth, I understand that all that apparent happiness was a meticulously crafted deception. The first indications that something was amiss emerged 6 months ago, when Darius and I decided to update our wills. We had saved diligently throughout our lives. Between the house, the land I inherited from my parents, and our bank savings, we had nearly $200,000 to bequeath to our children and grandchildren. It was Tyrone who suggested we consult a lawyer. "Mom, Dad, you're both 60 now. It's crucial to have everything in order," he stated, his smile now seeming sinister in retrospect. Aaliyah nodded in agreement, stroking my hand with the very fingers that would later propel me to my death. "We love you both so much, and we want to ensure you're completely protected," she added in her sweet, deceptive voice. How incredibly foolish I was to interpret those words as genuine affection. The lawyer, an elderly man named Mr. Langston whom we'd known for years, explained our options. We could establish a trust, divide the inheritance among Tyrone's children, or simply draft a traditional will. Tyrone insisted on being named as the sole heir, along with Aaliyah, claiming they would ensure a fair distribution to the grandchildren. Moreover, he argued, "You'll need us when you're older. It's best for us to have access to the resources to care for you properly." His tone made me uneasy, but Darius seemed convinced. My husband, always more trusting than I, readily accepted the proposal. I harbored doubts, especially since I recalled Deshaun's plans to support us financially in our later years. My eldest son had envisioned a future where he would care for us, but Deshaun was gone, leaving Tyrone as our only surviving child. We signed the documents on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember Aaliyah was wearing a pretty green dress and gave me a warm embrace after the ceremony. "Now we're officially a united family forever," she whispered in my ear. Her words sent a shiver down my spine then, though I didn't understand why. Tyrone shook his father's hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. That evening, while preparing dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake. The following weeks were profoundly unsettling. Tyrone and Aaliyah began visiting more frequently, but their visits felt different. They no longer came simply to spend time with family. Their visits were now filled with suggestions on how we should improve the house, what investments we should make, and what life insurance policies we should acquire. "Mom, you should consider selling this large house and moving somewhere smaller," Aaliyah suggested, scrutinizing our furniture with calculating eyes. "We could help you find a comfortable apartment in town." But I cherished our home. Every corner held precious memories. Every room echoed the stories of our 40 years together. The kitchen where I prepared countless meals for my family, the workshop where Darius created his masterpieces, the yard where our children and grandchildren had played. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. When I voiced my objections, I saw a flash of irritation in Tyrone's eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "Mom, you're being irrational," he said, using a tone he'd never employed with me before. "This house is far too large for 2 people your age. If you were to fall down the stairs, or something were to happen, we wouldn't be able to assist you in time." Aaliyah nodded emphatically, adding, "Besides, the upkeep must be incredibly expensive. It would be far more prudent to sell now while the housing market is strong, and move to something more suitable for your age." Darius began to consider their arguments. My husband, always practical, started to find logic in their suggestions. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister underlay this relentless pressure. One evening, after another tense conversation, I asked Darius if he didn't find Tyrone's sudden intense interest in our finances unusual. "Zariah, he simply cares about us," he replied while brushing his teeth. "Perhaps we should consider his suggestions. We're not as young as we used to be." But I saw a flicker of doubt in my husband's eyes, a shadow of uncertainty he didn't want to acknowledge. Now I know that Darius already suspected something, that he had begun to connect the dots that I hadn't even realized existed. The situation escalated when Tyrone suggested we grant him power of attorney over our finances. "It's purely a precaution," he explained while Aaliyah prepared tea in our kitchen, behaving as if she owned the place. "If either of you becomes ill or experiences a health issue, we can manage your affairs without any legal complications." His presentation was so natural, so logical, that it almost convinced me. But his insistence made me deeply uneasy. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Darius's breathing beside me, grappling to understand my growing unease. The next day, I sought advice from my sister Monique, who had always been more perceptive and suspicious than I. When I recounted Tyrone's pressure, she fell silent for a long moment. "Zariah," she finally said, "doesn't it strike you as odd that Tyrone is so eager to control your money? I mean, he has his own successful business. He's financially secure. Why would he need such extensive control over your finances?" Her words hit me like a slap in the face. She was absolutely right. Tyrone had never displayed any financial difficulties, had never borrowed money, had never shown any signs of needing our assistance. That afternoon, when Tyrone arrived for another of his discussions about our future, I decided to confront him directly. "Son," I said as we sat in the living room, "why is it so crucial for you to control our financial affairs? Your father and I are still of sound mind." His response was immediate and revealing. His face hardened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of someone else. Something cold, calculating, and profoundly dangerous. "Mom, it's not about control," he responded tensely. "It's about love, care, and family responsibility." But the way he uttered family responsibility sounded more like a threat than an expression of affection. Aaliyah, who had remained silent until then, intervened with her sweet yet firm voice. "Zariah, we simply want what's best for you. It's distressing to see you worrying about matters we can easily handle." That night, after they left, Darius and I had our first serious argument in years. He believed I was being paranoid, that I was imagining problems where none existed. I insisted something was terribly wrong, that our son's behavior had changed too drastically. "Darius," I said as we washed the dishes, "do you remember what Tyrone was like before Deshawn died? He was different, more distant, more. I don't know how to explain it, but there was something about him that frightened me." My husband stopped washing his plate and looked at me intently. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't noticed before: recognition. "Zariah," he said in a low voice, "there are things about Deshawn's death that I've never told you." My heart pounded so violently I feared it would burst from my chest. Darius's words hit me like a lightning bolt. "What about Deshawn's death?" I asked, my voice trembling. My husband sat heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, at the very table where we had shared thousands of family meals, where Deshawn had done his homework, and where Tyrone had always remained silent. Darius ran his hands over his face, as if trying to erase the memories that had tormented him for 25 years. "The night Deshawn died," he began in a broken voice, "Tyrone wasn't in his room studying as he claimed. I saw him leave the house around 8 o'clock. I followed him because something about his demeanor worried me. He'd been acting very strangely those days, more aggressive, more resentful." My husband paused, staring at his hands as if the terrible truth he had kept hidden for so long was inscribed upon them. "I saw them arguing by the gorge. Zariah, I heard them screaming horrible things at each other." My world began to spin. What were they arguing about? I whispered, even though a part of me no longer wanted to know the answer. Darius looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes, tears he hadn't shed at our eldest son's funeral. About the inheritance. Zariah, Tyrone was furious because Deshaun, being the eldest, would inherit most of our assets according to family tradition. But there was something more, something about money that Deshaun had discovered. What money? I asked, feeling the ground disappear beneath my feet. Darius sighed deeply before continuing. 3 days before he died, Deshaun came to talk to me in the workshop. He had discovered that Tyrone had been stealing money from the family savings account. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Deshaun had proof. He'd been investigating for months. My mind struggled to process what I was hearing. My youngest son, the one who had been so attentive after Deshaun's death, the one who had helped and cared for us, had been stealing from us even before his brother's death. Why didn't you ever tell me? I accused Darius, feeling the betrayal multiply tenfold. Because when I got to the gorge that night, it was already too late, he replied, his voice choked with emotion. I saw Tyrone standing next to Deshaun's body. Our youngest son was trembling, crying, and repeating over and over, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with desperate eyes and begged for my help. "Dad," he said, "Deshaun tripped when he was trying to hit me. I just defended myself and he lost his balance." Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "But you believed him," I murmured, even though I already knew the answer. Darius nodded slowly, his face etched with the guilt that had plagued him for decades. "He was my son, Zariah. My youngest son was asking for my help, and Deshaun was already dead. I couldn't bring one back to life by destroying the other. I thought it was a genuine accident, that Tyrone had learned his lesson, that he would become a better man after this." "And the stolen money?" I asked, needing to know every detail of this horrifying nightmare. "Tyrone promised he would repay it gradually, that he had taken the money to invest in a business that had failed. He swore he would never do anything like that again. And I believed him, Zariah. God forgive me. But I believed him because I needed to believe my son wasn't a killer." I rose from the table, my legs unsteady, supporting myself against the wall to prevent myself from falling. Everything I had believed about my family, about my surviving son, about the last 25 years of my life, was a fabrication. "Did he repay the money?" I asked, although I already knew the answer from the look on Darius's face. "Never," he replied. "In fact, he continued stealing small amounts, and I pretended not to notice because confronting him would have meant admitting I had covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Zariah. Every time I remained silent, every time I pretended not to see the dwindling bank accounts, I became more complicit in his crimes. The terrible reality began to solidify in my mind. That's why he's so interested in controlling our finances now," I murmured. "It's not because he cares about us. It's because he wants to finish what he started 25 years ago." Darius nodded gravely. "And there's something else, Zariah. Something I just discovered a few weeks ago." "What else could there be?" I asked, feeling as though my heart couldn't endure any more revelations. Darius went to his desk and retrieved some papers he'd been concealing beneath other documents. "I've been discreetly investigating Tyrone's finances. His carpentry business isn't as successful as he leads us to believe. In fact, he's on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes over $100,000 to several banks and suppliers." The papers trembled in my hands as I read the figures. Tyrone wasn't the successful man he portrayed himself to be. He was a desperate failure who had been living a life of lies and stolen money for decades. "Does Aaliyah know all this?" I asked, remembering her sweet smile and affectionate hugs. "I'm sure she does," Darius replied. "I've noticed how she steers the conversations when they discuss our money, how she asks specific questions about our savings, the value of the house, our life insurance policies. They're not innocent inquiries, Zariah. They're the questions of someone calculating precisely how much our deaths are worth." That sentence froze me to the core. "Our death," I whispered. It was the first time I had considered that Tyrone might intend to cause us physical harm. Until that moment, I had believed he simply wanted to rob or defraud us. But if he had killed his own brother for money, what would prevent him from killing his parents for the same reason? Darius, I said, grasping his hands, we have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about Deshaun and about what's happening now. But my husband shook his head, a look of hopelessness clouding his face. With what evidence, Zariah? I'm an accomplice in covering up a murder. If I speak now, I'll go to jail too. And besides, who's going to believe a 65-year-old man who has been keeping this secret for 25 years? He was right. Do we simply wait for him to kill us as he killed Deshaun? We're going to be extremely cautious, Darius said, attempting to sound more confident than he felt. We're going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather evidence too. But his words were interrupted by the ringing telephone. It was Tyrone. Hi, Mom, he said in that sweet voice that now sounded utterly sinister to me. Aaliyah and I were discussing this, and we think it would be wonderful to celebrate your 40th wedding anniversary with something special. How about we take you to those mountains you've always talked about next weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, and have a perfect day together. My blood ran cold. I looked at Darius, who had overheard the conversation and shared my look of terror. That's a very thoughtful idea, son, I managed to reply, my voice trembling. But let us consider it, and we'll get back to you tomorrow. After hanging up, Darius and I stared at each other in silence, knowing we had just received an invitation to our own execution. The mountains, I murmured. He's going to take us to the mountains to kill us and make it look like an accident. Darius nodded gravely, just as he had done at the gorge with Deshaun. That night we didn't sleep a wink, clinging to each other in our bed, desperately planning how we could save ourselves from our own son. The next few days were a terrifying nightmare of pretense. Darius and I had to act as if nothing were amiss when Tyrone and Aaliyah visited, smiling when they discussed the mountain trip, nodding enthusiastically when they excitedly spoke of spending time together as a family. But inwardly, every fiber of my being screamed in fear. I knew I was looking into the eyes of my eldest son's murderers, and that they were now plotting to do the same to me and my husband. Aaliyah arrived on Wednesday afternoon with a shopping bag, and that radiant smile that now resembled the grimace of a demon. Zariah, dear, she said, embracing me with the very arms that would soon push me to my death. I bought some supplies for our mountain adventure. Cookies, water, fruit. Everything we'll need for the picnic. She displayed the contents of the bag as if she were an excited child, but I could only think about how each item could be used to cover up our murders. I also brought my new camera, she added, producing an expensive digital camera. I want to capture every moment of this special day. They'll be photos we'll treasure forever. The irony of her words made me nauseous. The only photograph she would take would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of some cliff, if anyone ever found us. Tyrone appeared behind her, carrying a brand new hiking backpack. Dad, he said to Darius with feigned enthusiasm, I bought all the necessary equipment for a safe hike. Ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit. Every word that escaped his lips sounded like a cruel mockery. Safety equipment to meticulously plan our murders. The sheer perversity of the situation made me dizzy. Isn't it a bit dangerous for people our age? I asked, attempting to sound nonchalant while desperately searching for any excuse to cancel the trip. Aaliyah stroked my cheek with a false tenderness that churned my stomach. That's why we chose a very easy and safe trail, she assured me. It's a hike even children can manage. Plus, Tyrone and I will be there to take care of you the entire time. Yes, they would take care of us until the precise moment they decided to push us off a cliff. That night, when they finally left, Darius and I sat in our living room trembling, not merely from the cold, but from the sheer terror we had suppressed for hours. We can't go, I said, clutching his hands. We simply can't. We'll invent some excuse. If we don't go, Darius replied gravely, they'll find another way to kill us. Maybe something that looks even more accidental, a house fire, a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains we know what they're planning. His words, though terrifyingly logical, offered no solace. So what do you suggest? I asked, desperation clawing at my throat, searching for a lifeline. Darius was silent for a few minutes, lost in thought, before finally speaking. We're going, but we'll be prepared. I'm hiding my cell phone set to record everything. If we survive, we'll have evidence. And if we don't, his voice cracked, the unspoken fear hanging heavy in the air. At least someone will know the truth. Friday night, our dinner remained largely untouched. This might be our last meal together. In this kitchen, in this house. A place overflowing with happy memories from a time when we were a real family. Darius reviewed his will again, ensuring that if something happened to us, Tyrone wouldn't inherit everything without a record of our suspicions. I wrote a letter, he confessed, producing a sealed envelope from his desk drawer. It's addressed to your sister, Monique. It explains everything we know about Deshawn's death, and what we believe Tyrone plans to do to us. I've hidden it where we keep our important documents. If we don't come back from this trip, at least she'll know where to find the truth. That night we clung to each other, whispering words of love that might be our last. If anything happens to me, Darius said, his voice thick with emotion, I want you to know these 40 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite everything, despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life. I wept silently, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body pressed against mine, the familiar scent of his skin. Saturday dawned with a deceptively clear sky, mocking our predicament. Tyrone arrived early, whistling a jaunty tune that sent a shiver of unease down my spine. Morning, lovebirds, he chirped from the doorway. Ready for your big adventure? Aaliyah appeared behind him, radiant like a bride on her wedding day. Except this wedding was a prelude to death. Breakfast was a strained affair, barely touched. Tyrone meticulously detailed our route. It's a beautiful trail, he said, unfolding a map on the table. Leads to a lookout point with a spectacular view of the valley. His eyes gleamed with an unsettling enthusiasm, a demonic sparkle that chilled me to the bone. Of course, the view would be spectacular. It would be the last view we'd ever see. The trail has some steep sections, Aaliyah added, her tone deceptively casual, as if offering helpful tourist information. But nothing experienced hikers like you can't handle. Her comment, a cruel joke considering we were two 60-year-olds who rarely ventured beyond a leisurely stroll in the park. As we loaded the car, I observed Tyrone meticulously checking his backpack, ensuring he had everything he needed for his sinister plan. I saw ropes, a small shovel, and what appeared to be a flare gun. What's that for? I asked, pointing to the gun. Safety, he replied smoothly, without missing a beat. If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal. Of course, a distress signal after they pushed us off a cliff, ensuring our deaths would be deemed a tragic accident during a family hike. Everything was calculated. Every detail meticulously planned to make our murders appear perfectly natural. The 2-hour drive to the mountains felt like an eternity. Aaliyah played upbeat music, singing along as if this were a joyous family outing. Tyrone drove cautiously, adhering to every speed limit and stopping at every stop sign. He couldn't risk an accident that would jeopardize his perfect plan. During the drive, Darius discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. Everything from that moment on would be documented. If we survived, we would have proof. If not, the truth wouldn't die with us. When we reached the trailhead, my heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The place was undeniably beautiful, towering trees, the soothing sound of a nearby river, but to me it was the setting for my own execution. Tyrone and Aaliyah unloaded their backpacks, smiling and joking as if this were the happiest day of their lives. Ready for the adventure? Tyrone asked. And for the first time in 25 years, I saw the same chilling glint in his eyes that I'd witnessed the night he killed his brother. The trail began relatively easy, meandering through lush trees and moss-covered rocks. Aaliyah walked ahead, constantly taking pictures and commenting on the scenic beauty. Look at those wildflowers, she exclaimed, pointing to bushes bursting with yellow blossoms and a vibrantly colored bird. Her performance was flawless, The picture of a devoted daughter-in-law enjoying a special day with her in-laws. Tyrone lingered behind us, ostensibly to ensure we didn't fall behind, but I could feel his eyes like daggers on our backs. Every time I glanced at him, he offered a practiced smile, honed over 25 years of deceit. "How are you doing, Mom and Dad?" He'd ask with feigned concern. "Need to stop and rest?" After an hour the trail grew steeper. My legs felt heavy, Darius's breathing labored. We were not accustomed to this level of exertion, a fact our murderous children knew perfectly well. They had chosen a route designed to physically exhaust us, rendering us vulnerable when the time came to execute their plan. "We're almost at the lookout," Aaliyah announced. Despite the map I'd seen at home indicating at least another hour of hiking, her lie confirmed their intentions. They had no intention of reaching the actual lookout. The place where they planned to kill us was much closer. Throughout the hike I tried to commit every detail to memory, every tree, every rock, to serve as a reference point if I survived and needed to explain to the police exactly where everything happened. Darius did the same, and we occasionally exchanged glances filled with a mixture of terror and grim determination. We were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew this was our only chance to gather evidence against our murderers. "Oh, look at that!" Aaliyah suddenly cried, pointing to a rock formation to our right. "That cliff has an incredible view. Why don't we climb up there for some special photos?" My blood ran cold. This was it, the place they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose approximately 90 feet above the main trail, accessible via a treacherous secondary path far more dangerous than the one we'd been following. The rocks were loose, the trees sparse, offering little to grab onto in case of a fall. From the top, a sheer drop plunged into a deep gorge filled with jagged rocks. "I don't know if that's such a good idea," I said, attempting to sound nonchalant. "That trail looks pretty dangerous for people our age." But Tyrone had already started toward the turnoff, carrying his backpack filled with safety equipment I knew he wouldn't use to save us. "Come on, Mom," he said, employing the coaxing tone he'd used as a child to get his way. "It'll only take a few minutes. Besides, Aaliyah's right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular." The way he said spectacular sent a shiver of dread through me. Spectacular for whoever viewed them as evidence of our accident. Darius squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that his phone was recording. We had to continue. We had to reach the end to secure the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they would simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. The climb was agonizing. Loose rocks slid beneath our feet, and several times I almost fell. The most terrifying aspect was realizing how perfectly this location suited a murder. A fall from the top would be unsurvivable, and there would be no witnesses. "Almost there," Aaliyah called from above, where she'd already arrived with the agility of someone who'd carefully planned this route. Tyrone followed, then assisted Darius and me with the final few feet. His hands on my arms felt like the claws of a vulture. The lookout was indeed spectacular. The entire valley stretched before us, mountains in the distance, the river winding through the trees. Under different circumstances, it would have been a beautiful family moment. But knowing what I knew, the place felt like the perfect setting for a nightmare. "Come over here for the photos," Aaliyah called, positioning herself near the cliff's edge. "I want the valley in the background." Darius and I approached slowly, each step bringing us closer to our final destination. I saw Tyrone strategically positioning himself behind us, calculating angles, measuring distances. "Perfect," Aaliyah exclaimed, raising her camera. "Now hug each other and smile." Darius and I hugged, likely for the last time, as she snapped picture after picture. Each flash felt like a lightning strike announcing the impending storm. "Take one more," Tyrone suggested, moving closer. "But this time step back a little so the landscape looks better." One step back would place us directly on the precipice. Darius and I exchanged a look. The moment had arrived. We moved back as instructed, feeling the solid ground disappear beneath our feet, the terrifying emptiness of the abyss behind us. Aaliyah raised her camera again, but this time, I saw something different in her eyes. The pretense was gone. The mask had fallen. "Smile," she said, her voice devoid of sweetness. "This is going to be your last photo." At that instant Tyrone lunged, arms outstretched. The plan was simple. Push us backward into the void, take some photos of the accident, then descend to discover our broken bodies. But Darius had been preparing for this. In the final second, he grabbed Tyrone's wrist and pulled him forward. "If we're going to die, you're coming with us," he roared, a fury I'd never witnessed before erupting within him. For a moment, all four of us teetered on the cliff's edge, locked in a macabre dance between life and death. Aaliyah screamed, attempting to help Tyrone, but the combined weight was too much. I felt the ground give way, gravity winning the battle. Then we all fell together, locked in a deadly embrace, screaming as the air whipped past us, the rocky ground rushing up to meet us. In those seconds that stretched into an eternity, I thought of Deshawn, of how he must have felt when Tyrone pushed him into the gorge 25 years ago. The impact was brutal. I heard the sickening crunch of breaking bones, the sound of my own body shattering against the rocks. The pain was indescribable. Even more terrifying was the metallic taste of blood, and the certainty that Tyrone had won. This time there would be no witnesses to tell the truth. But then I heard Darius's voice, weak but clear. "Zariah, don't move. Play dead." And I realized something incredible. I was still alive. The pain was so intense I thought I would lose my mind. Every fiber of my being screamed in agony. Blood streamed down my face. Something wet and sticky soaked my clothes. But Darius's voice echoed in my ears like a divine command. "Play dead." With a strength I never knew I possessed, I remained completely still, controlling even my breathing to make it imperceptible. A few feet away I heard Tyrone and Aaliyah groaning in pain. They too had survived the fall, but their groans suggested they were in worse shape than we were. "Aaliyah," I heard my son's voice, broken and strained. "Are you okay?" His concern for his wife twisted my stomach. This man, who had murdered his own brother and attempted to kill us, was still capable of love. "I think I broke my leg," Aaliyah moaned. "It hurts so much," Tyrone groaned. "And what about the old people?" Her disrespectful reference to us confirmed what I already knew. We had never been family to her, only obstacles in her path to our money. I heard movement as if Tyrone was crawling toward us. My heart pounded so fiercely, I feared he would hear it. "They're dead," he announced after what felt like an eternity. "Both of them." Eyes open but not breathing. His lie filled me with a strange, desperate hope. If he believed we were dead, perhaps we had a chance. "Perfect," Aaliyah whispered, her voice laced with chilling satisfaction. "It worked just like we planned. Well, except for the part where we fell too." I heard her bitter laugh. "At least we won't have to pretend to love them anymore." For the next few minutes, an eternity, Tyrone and Aaliyah discussed their situation. Both were injured but mobile. Their new plan: crawl until they found a place to call for help, then spin a tale of miraculous survival from a tragic accident that had killed their poor grandparents. "Remember the story," Tyrone instructed Aaliyah. "We were taking pictures when a rock came loose under Dad's feet. He tripped and trying to grab on, he pulled Mom with him. We tried to help but we fell too. It's important our stories match." "I know," Aaliyah replied. "We've practiced this 100 times. We're the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. For us, we lost our dear in-laws in a horrible accident." Her performance was so convincing that if I hadn't lived the truth, I would have believed every word. Gradually, their voices faded as they crawled toward what they hoped would be their salvation. When silence finally descended, Darius whispered my name so softly I almost missed it. "Zariah, are you okay?" I replied in the same hushed tone, confirming I was alive, though terribly injured. "My left leg is broken," he told me, his voice choked with pain. "And I think I have a few fractured ribs. What about you?" I took mental stock of my body. A sharp pain stabbed my right arm. My head throbbed as if someone were hammering it, and my shoulder felt definitely amiss, but I was alive, and that was more than I had dared hope for. We're bad, but we're alive, I whispered. But there's no signal down here. That was the most terrifying aspect of our predicament. We were alive but trapped at the bottom of a gorge, injured, and unable to communicate with the outside world. If no one came looking for us, we would die slowly from thirst, hunger, or our wounds. Darius, I whispered, urgency lacing my voice. Before it's too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that really happened the night Deshawn died. My husband sighed deeply, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for 25 years. That night, he began, his voice trembling, Deshawn came to find me in the workshop. He was furious. He had papers in his hands, bank statements. He showed me proof that Tyrone had been stealing money from our accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. Deshawn had been investigating, because he'd noticed discrepancies in our savings. The physical pain mingled with the emotional agony as I listened to the truth that had been hidden for decades. Deshawn wanted to confront Tyrone that night, Darius continued. I tried to calm him down, to convince him to wait until the next day, but he was determined. He said he couldn't sleep knowing his younger brother was stealing from us. And you followed him? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I followed him because I was afraid of what might happen. I knew Deshawn's temper when he got angry, and I also knew, well, I'd noticed something strange about Tyrone lately. A coldness that sent shivers down my spine. When I got to the gorge, Darius continued, his voice strained, I found them screaming at each other. Deshawn had the papers in his hand, waving them in Tyrone's face. You're a thief. He was yelling. You're stealing from our own parents. Tyrone denied everything, claimed Deshawn was crazy, making things up. My heart pounded as I pictured the scene. My two sons confronting each other in the darkness, one accusing the other of betrayal. What happened next? Darius paused for a long time before continuing. Deshawn told him that if he didn't return the money and confess everything to us, he would tell us the truth himself. Tyrone went berserk. He yelled that Deshawn had always been the favorite, that he'd always had everything easy, that it was time for things to change. And then, Darius's voice broke. Tyrone pushed Deshawn. It wasn't an accident. He pushed him with all his strength, deliberately. I saw Deshawn in my mind's eye, trying to regain his balance, his arms flailing desperately, searching for something to hold on to. But it was too late. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mingling with the blood from my wounds. Why did you never tell me the truth? Darius sighed deeply. Because when I got to where Tyrone was, he was crying, trembling, telling me over and over that it had been an accident, that he hadn't meant to do it. He begged me not to tell you anything, that he couldn't lose you too. But you knew it was a lie, I murmured, the words heavy with years of unspoken pain. Yes, but he was my son, Zariah, my only surviving son. How could I turn him over to the police? How could I destroy what was left of our family? His justification stung as much as my physical injuries. And the stolen money? I continued. Tyrone promised me he would return it little by little. He swore it had been a bad decision, that he had been desperate, that it would never happen again. But he never returned a single penny. In fact, he kept stealing, and I kept quiet because every day that passed made me more of an accomplice to his crime. Just then we heard voices in the distance. Tyrone and Aaliyah had managed to find help. Soon, rescue teams would arrive, and our murderous children would play the roles of their lives, the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. The voices drew closer, accompanied by the whirring of helicopters overhead. The rescue team had arrived, bringing with them the most crucial moment of our lives. Darius and I had to make a decision in a matter of minutes. Should we continue to pretend to be dead, waiting for the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth, or risk being rescued alongside our murderers? Zariah, Darius whispered urgently. The phone recorded everything up there. We have Aaliyah's confession about the plan. We have Tyrone admitting we're obstacles. We have everything. But if they find us alive now, they can destroy the evidence before we can hand it over to the authorities. He was right. If Tyrone and Aaliyah realized we'd survived and heard their confessions, They would find a way to silence us forever. This time it wouldn't be an accident. It would be something far more direct and definitive. We had to wait for the perfect moment. "They're down here," Tyrone's voice shouted from above. "My parents. Please hurry." His performance was flawless, his voice broken with apparent pain and despair. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed he was a son devastated by the loss of his parents. "Sir, stay calm," an authoritative voice replied, belonging to the head of the rescue team. "We're going to come down to evaluate you. You and your wife can move." I heard the sounds of ropes and equipment being prepared for the descent. Aaliyah had perfected her role as the grieving widow. "I can't believe this happened," she sobbed. "We were taking pictures so happy. It all happened so fast. A rock came loose and they fell." Each word was a stab to my heart, knowing she would repeat those words to the police, to the media, to anyone who would listen. The rescuers began their descent. I heard their voices drawing closer, the sound of their boots on the rock, the clinking of their equipment. Darius discreetly squeezed my hand, a reminder that we had to maintain the charade, no matter what. "They're here," one of the rescuers shouted upon finding us. "We have 2 people at the bottom of the gorge." He approached, examining us. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing so shallow it was almost imperceptible. I felt his hand searching for a pulse on my neck, his ear close to my mouth, attempting to detect any sign of breathing. "This one still has a faint pulse," he announced, referring to Darius. "The woman? I'm not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately." My heart raced. The plan was working. They would believe Darius was near death but still alive, while I would appear close enough to death to not pose an immediate threat. For the next few minutes, which felt like hours, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them place an oxygen mask on me, examine my wounds, secure me to a stretcher. The entire time, I fought against every instinct screaming at me to open my eyes, to call for help, to stop pretending. "The man is stable but critical," I heard one of the paramedics report over the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition. Pulse is almost imperceptible. We need to transport them to the hospital immediately." Perfect. They would take us to the hospital, where we would have the opportunity to speak to the authorities without Tyrone and Aaliyah being able to silence us. During the ascent on the stretchers, I could hear Aaliyah's feigned sobs and the rescuers' words of comfort. Offered to her and Tyrone was a simple yet profound statement. "You were so brave to survive this." The speaker's words, though well-intentioned, masked a breathtaking lack of awareness. A miracle, they thought, that she was relatively unharmed. Little did they know that the true miracle was Darius and me being alive to unveil the truth. A truth they desperately sought to bury. In the medical helicopter, as we soared towards the hospital, I was acutely aware of Darius's presence on the stretcher beside mine. The paramedics, focused intently on stabilizing him, engaged in hushed, urgent conversations. Their words revealed the gravity of his condition. His injuries were far more severe than my own. For a terrifying moment, the fear that he might succumb to his wounds before we could expose their treachery seized me. I heard one paramedic, his voice a soothing balm against the cruel deception of my family, say to me, "Ma'am, if you can hear me, hold on. We'll be at the hospital in a few minutes." His genuine compassion stood in stark contrast to the lies I had endured. The hospital erupted in a cacophony of controlled chaos upon our arrival. Doctors and nurses darted between patients, their rapid-fire medical pronouncements unintelligible to my ears. I was swiftly transported to an emergency room, where the medical team immediately began treating my injuries. Maintaining the charade of unconsciousness proved a delicate balancing act. I needed to feign sleep while simultaneously devising a way to communicate with someone trustworthy. "Doctor," I heard a nurse remark, her voice laced with a hint of professional curiosity, "her vital signs are unusual. Her pulse is stronger than expected for someone in her supposed condition." My heart lurched. They had seen through my ruse. My performance was so unconvincing that my own body was betraying my deception. The doctor murmured. his response a blend of professional detachment and underlying intrigue. It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma. The body has remarkable ways of clinging to life. Let's keep a close watch. The next few hours will be crucial. We've done all we can. Aaliyah, feigning pain, let out a sound that I interpreted as a sigh of relief, disguised as a sob. Can we see them? Tyrone inquired, his voice edged with a strained composure. Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye just in case. The doctor granted their request. The approaching footsteps signaled the most perilous moment of all, convincing my murderous son of my imminent demise. Tyrone's presence settled beside my bed, his hand lightly brushing against mine. Every fiber of my being urged me to recoil, but I remained still. "Mom," he whispered, his voice a venomous blend of affection and betrayal. "If you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I'm so sorry this happened." His words, deceptively sweet, carried a deadly undercurrent. Aaliyah approached from the other side, her voice dripping with equally false compassion. "Zariah, dear," she murmured, her tone reeking of insincerity. "You've been like a mother to me. We'll never forget you." Liar. The only reason they would remember me was because they would have to live with the knowledge of their crime. But then Tyrone leaned close, whispering words that sent a chill down my spine. "I hope you've learned your lesson, Mom. You should never have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Deshawn." In that instant I knew our plan had succeeded. Tyrone had unwittingly confessed, and although I lacked a recording device, a nurse in the room had witnessed the exchange. His confession, a chilling echo in my ears, confirmed their guilt. The mention of Deshawn, the implication that some truths should remain hidden, and the acknowledgement that our financial inquiries had triggered their violent act. These were critical pieces of the puzzle. But I needed more, a full, unambiguous confession that couldn't be later refuted. Nurse Chantel, as her ID badge identified her. A young woman whose initial surprise quickly morphed into horror, stood frozen near the monitoring equipment. I could see, through my half-closed lids, the widening of her eyes, a clear indicator that she grasped the terrifying implications of Tyrone's words. "What did you say about Deshawn?" Aaliyah whispered, her voice betraying her surprise. Tyrone, realizing his slip-up, tensed. "Nothing," he muttered, attempting damage control. "I just meant, well, Mom always wondered what really happened that night." "I guess it doesn't matter anymore," Aaliyah added, her words laced with a nervous energy. But it did matter. And Aaliyah, shrewd enough to recognize her husband's blunder, acted decisively. "Tyrone," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Let's go. The doctors need space to work." The tension between them was palpable, a shared understanding that they had revealed too much in the wrong place. After their departure, Nurse Chantel approached my bed. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know you can hear me. What I just heard, it's not right. If you are in danger, you need to tell me somehow." Her urgency ignited a spark of hope within me. Someone else suspected. With excruciating slowness, almost imperceptibly, I moved my index finger. It was the slightest of movements, yet Nurse Chantel spotted it immediately. "Oh my God," she breathed. "She's pretending to be unconscious." I moved my finger again, this time twice. "Yes, listen," she said, leaning closer. "I'm going to pretend I'm checking your monitors. If you are in danger from those people who were just here, move your finger 3 times. Without hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Nurse Chantel gasped. "They did this to you." 3 more movements confirmed their culpability. The nurse moved away, feigning attention to my 4-line, while she wrestled with her decision. Finally she returned. "I'm going to talk to the doctor in charge," she whispered. "But you need to keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. The ensuing minutes stretched into an eternity. Nurse Chantel left, leaving me alone with my desperate prayers that she would believe me and take appropriate action. The sound of approaching footsteps finally broke the silence. It was Nurse Chantel, accompanied by the head doctor and, surprisingly, 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said quietly, Nurse Chantal told me about your situation. If you can hear me, we need you to know that you are safe now. The officers are here to protect you." A wave of intense relief threatened to shatter my carefully maintained facade. "Can you open your eyes?" an officer asked. Slowly, painstakingly, I opened my eyes. The hospital lights momentarily blinded me, but I gradually focused on the concerned faces surrounding me. "Thank God," Nurse Chantal murmured, her relief palpable. "I thought I was going crazy." "Ma'am," said Detective Jamal, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor. "I'm Detective Jamal. We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what really happened on that mountain?" My voice, hoarse from hours of simulating unconsciousness, emerged as a raspy whisper. My son and his wife pushed us." The following hours blurred into a whirlwind of statements, recordings, and shocking revelations. I recounted everything: Deshawn's death, Tyrone's embezzlement, the pressure to alter our will, and the meticulously planned attempt on our lives. But the most crucial piece of evidence resided on Darius's phone. "Your husband has recorded evidence?" the detective asked, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Yes," I replied. "Everything is on his phone. The confessions, the plans, everything." The detective immediately proceeded to Darius's room. Darius, having regained consciousness an hour after me, handed over his phone without hesitation when the detective explained the situation. "Here's everything," he said, his voice weak but resolute. 2 years of lies and the truth about what happened today." While police technicians analyzed the recording, Tyrone and Aaliyah remained in the waiting room, maintaining their charade of grief for the benefit of other hospital visitors. They were utterly unaware that their meticulously crafted performance was on the verge of collapse. "The recording is clear," the detective announced after an hour. "We have explicit confessions regarding Deshawn's murder, admissions of theft, and direct evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you two. It's more than sufficient for arrest." "But are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, genuinely concerned for our safety. "If they realize we're alive and talking." The detective nodded, comprehending my apprehension. "We already have officers in position. As soon as we have the arrest warrant signed, we'll take them in. In the meantime, you are both under police protection." The irony wasn't lost on me. Downstairs, Tyrone and Aaliyah were likely consoling other grieving relatives, accepting condolences for our supposed deaths, and plotting how to manage our funeral and inheritance. Meanwhile, upstairs, we were systematically dismantling their carefully constructed web of deceit. "Is there anything else?" the detective asked, producing a file. "After hearing your story, we investigated your son's finances. Not only is he bankrupt as you suspected, but he also owes money to some very dangerous people, unofficial lenders who don't take excuses." My blood ran cold. "You mean we weren't just inconvenient to him?" I asked, fear tightening my chest. "He confirmed it," the detective replied. "You were his only salvation. With your inheritance, he could pay off his debts and start over. Without you, he would probably be dead in a few weeks." This revelation added a chilling dimension to their betrayal. They hadn't merely viewed us as obstacles. We were their financial lifeline. Our deaths weren't merely convenient. They were absolutely necessary for his survival. "And what will happen to our grandchildren?" I asked, a fresh wave of anguish washing over me at the thought of their innocent children. "Social services will take temporary custody," the detective responded gently. "But as I understand it, you could apply for custody once you recover from your injuries." The prospect of raising the children of our murderers felt overwhelming, yet it was the only way to ensure some good would emerge from this horrifying ordeal. Those children were innocent and deserved a loving, stable home. "It's time," the detective announced as an officer entered with documents. "The warrants are signed. We're going to arrest them now." From my hospital window, overlooking the parking lot, I witnessed officers discreetly taking their positions. The moment I'd awaited for 25 years had finally arrived. Tyrone Black and Aaliyah Black, I heard the officer's firm voice. You are under arrest for the murder of Deshaun Black and the attempted murder of Zariah and Darius Black. The ensuing silence was deafening. Then Aaliyah's hysterical outburst. What are you talking about? We're the victims here. Our in-laws died in an accident. Ma'am, the officer replied calmly. Your in-laws are alive and they have provided complete evidence of your crimes. A moment of stunned silence followed by a desperate scream from Tyrone. That's impossible. We saw them die. They were dead. His involuntary confession was recorded, further solidifying the case against them. Through the police radio, I heard Aaliyah begin to shift blame onto Tyrone. It was all his idea. I didn't want to do any of this. He forced me. And Tyrone, in his desperation, countered with a desperate accusation. You were the one who suggested the cliff. You planned all of this. Within minutes, their long-standing alliance fractured as each desperately attempted to save themselves. Detective Jamal returned an hour later. His expression a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. They're arrested and on their way to the station, he informed me. They're both trying to blame each other, which only strengthens our case. But there's something else I need to tell you. What else? I asked, my heart pounding. During the arrest, we found this in your son's backpack, he said, revealing a small digital recorder. Apparently, he had been recording his conversations with you and your husband for the past few weeks, probably looking for evidence that you suspected something. My blood ran cold. What does that mean? I whispered. It means he knew you were starting to discover the truth, the detective sighed. The trip to the mountain wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a direct response to your suspicions. In one of the recordings you can clearly hear Aaliyah telling him, we have to act fast before they go to the police. The depth of their planning and the chilling calculation left me breathless. They hadn't simply planned to kill us. They had been meticulously monitoring our every conversation, assessing the level of threat we posed. We were lab rats and they were the scientists observing our every move. There's something else, the detective continued, that we uncovered during the investigation of his finances. Your son not only owed money to dangerous lenders, but he had also forged your signature on several documents trying to access your bank accounts. If you had died on that mountain, he would have had immediate access to all your resources. Each revelation felt like another stab to the heart. My own son hadn't just plotted my murder. He had been systematically stealing from me, forging my signature, betraying every principle of trust one had instilled in him. How much money did he steal in total? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. About $50,000 over the last 5 years, the detective replied. Small amounts that he thought you wouldn't notice but which, when added up, amount to a significant sum. The money Darius and I had painstakingly saved over decades was used to fund our son's lavish lifestyle, while he planned our murder. The following days in the hospital were a whirlwind of police interviews, legal consultations, and calls from news outlets that had latched onto the story. The local press dubbed it the most horrible family betrayal of the decade, and reporters from across the nation sought our perspective. My sister Monique arrived from a nearby town, weeping and embracing me as if years had passed since our last meeting. Zariah, she repeated, her voice choked with emotion. I always knew there was something strange about Tyrone after Deshaun's death, but I never imagined he was capable of this. Her words offered a measure of comfort, validating my maternal instincts. And the kids? I asked, referring to my grandchildren in temporary social services custody. I saw them yesterday, Monique replied sadly. They're confused, asking why their parents can't come home. They're too young to understand what really happened. Our lawyer, Mr. Langston, the same one who had prepared our will, brought news of the legal proceedings. The case is solid, he assured us. With the recordings, the confessions during the arrest, and all the financial evidence, it's almost impossible for them to escape significant convictions. But then he delivered a chilling update. However, they are trying to negotiate a lesser guilty plea by claiming it was a crime of passion, not premeditated. A crime of passion? I exclaimed incredulously. They planned this for weeks, bought special equipment, and chose the perfect location. I know, Mr. Langston nodded gravely. And we have evidence of premeditation, but their lawyers are going to argue that it was a desperate decision made under extreme financial pressure. The possibility that they might receive reduced sentences fueled my rage. They had murdered Deshawn, attempted to murder us, and systematically stolen our money for years, and now they sought to portray themselves as victims. What can we do to ensure they get what they deserve? I asked, my voice filled with determination. Testify, Mr. Langston replied simply. Your testimony, combined with all the evidence, will be crucial for the jury to understand the true nature of these crimes. But I warn you, it's going to be emotionally devastating to face your son in court. He was right. The prospect of confronting Tyrone, listening to his lawyer's attempts at justification, and publicly reliving this nightmare was overwhelming, but it was a necessary act for Deshawn, for us, and for our grandchildren who deserve to know the truth. 3 weeks after the arrest, Darius and I finally returned home. Our wounds had healed sufficiently to allow us to move around, though Darius still required crutches and I wore a sling. The house felt alien, like a stage set after the actors had departed. Everything remained exactly as it was on the day of our family outing. The breakfast dishes in the sink, the unmade bed, the wilted flowers Tyrone had given me. A stark reminder that our lives had irrevocably changed. Do you think we'll ever be happy again? I asked Darius that first night back, lying in our familiar bed. He hugged me with his uninjured arm and sighed deeply. I don't know, Zariah, he said. But we're alive. We have the truth on our side, and for the first time in 25 years, we don't have to live with secrets. The trial commenced 6 months later. On the day of my testimony, I met Tyrone's gaze for the first time since his arrest. I saw no remorse, no pain, only a cold, calculating stranger who had convincingly masqueraded as my son for decades. After recounting every horrific detail of our ordeal, I addressed him directly from the witness stand. Tyrone, I said, my voice steady. I don't know who you are, but you are no longer my son. My son died the night you killed Deshawn, and what has been living in his place for 25 years is a monster that I unwittingly helped raise. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a guilty verdict. First-degree murder for Deshawn's death and first-degree attempted murder for our attempted murder. Aaliyah received the same conviction as an accomplice. Both were sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. A year later, Darius and I began the process of formally adopting our grandchildren. These innocent children deserved a chance to know true love, not the manipulative and toxic affection they had received from their biological parents. Every night as I tuck them into bed, I tell them about their Uncle Deshawn, a brother they never had the chance to meet. Sharing stories of his kindness, his honesty, and his unrealized dreams. Zariah realized that family could be both a shield and a dagger. The betrayals that clawed at her soul became the fire that steeled her resolve. She would no longer be silent, no longer be the victim. This was no longer just her fight, it was her reckoning.